When people first think about Linux security, they usually picture stopping attackers from getting in, but a big part of real defense is noticing when something has already changed and then responding in a way that prevents the damage from spreading. That is the theme of integrity, which is the idea that files, programs, and system settings should remain trustworthy over time, even as updates happen and even as users make changes. Integrity also has a darker twin, which is destruction, because sometimes the secure move is not to preserve data but to remove it safely so it cannot be recovered later. Beginners often treat integrity checks and secure deletion as separate topics, but they fit together because both are about controlling what remains on a system and what can be trusted as evidence. Along the way, you also have to consider supply chain risk, which is the risk that the software you install or update might be compromised before it ever reaches you. Finally, banners sound like a small detail, but they are part of how systems communicate boundaries and expectations to anyone who connects. This episode connects all of that into one coherent mental model, so you can explain why integrity tools exist, what they can and cannot prove, and how secure destruction and verification fit into responsible administration. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start with a plain definition of integrity in the context of a Linux system, because it is not just a moral term, it is a measurable property. Integrity means that a file is what you believe it is, a configuration is what you intended it to be, and a program running today matches the version you approved yesterday. If an attacker changes a system, they rarely announce it, so integrity checks are ways to detect silent changes that could indicate compromise, misconfiguration, or accidental damage. The tricky part is that systems change legitimately all the time, through updates, logs, user files, and normal operations. So integrity monitoring must distinguish expected changes from suspicious changes. This is why integrity is often built on baselines, meaning a known good snapshot of what important files should look like, combined with ongoing checks that compare current reality to that baseline. The reason this matters for Linux Plus is that you are expected to understand integrity as a security control category, not as a single command, and to recognize how tools implement that category through hashing and metadata comparison. Advanced Intrusion Detection Environment, AIDE, is a classic example of a baseline-driven integrity tool, and the key idea is simple even if the details can be advanced. AIDE builds a database of file properties, such as sizes, permissions, ownership, and cryptographic hashes, and then later it scans the file system again and reports what changed. The hashes matter because they detect content changes even when timestamps are manipulated or when a file is replaced with something of the same name. The properties matter because permission changes can be as important as content changes, especially if a sensitive file becomes writable or executable in a new way. AIDE does not magically know which changes are good or bad, so it depends on the baseline being created when the system is known to be clean, and it depends on the administrator reviewing differences thoughtfully. The beginner lesson is that AIDE is more like a smoke detector than a security guard, because it alerts you to change, but you still have to investigate the cause. The concept of a baseline is worth lingering on, because beginners sometimes assume the baseline is just a file you generate once and forget. In reality, baselines are living artifacts that must be updated when legitimate changes happen, such as software updates, configuration improvements, and approved new services. If you never update the baseline, the tool will constantly alert, and constant alerts train you to ignore alerts, which is one of the most dangerous patterns in security operations. If you update the baseline too casually, you may accidentally bless malicious changes, which turns the baseline into a record of compromise rather than a record of truth. The mature approach is to treat baseline updates as change management, meaning you understand what changed, why it changed, and whether it matches expected maintenance. This is also where verification becomes a mindset, because you are not simply accepting change, you are checking that change aligns with trusted sources and known good processes. When you understand baselines this way, integrity monitoring becomes a disciplined habit rather than a noisy tool you fight with. Verification is broader than integrity monitoring because it also includes proving that software you obtained is authentic and has not been tampered with in transit or at rest. Verification can involve checking cryptographic signatures, validating hashes against trusted published values, and ensuring that your package sources are trustworthy. A digest like Secure Hash Algorithm 256, SHA 256, can help you confirm that a downloaded file matches what the publisher intended, but only if you obtain the expected hash from a trustworthy channel. Signatures go a step further by allowing you to verify that a trusted signer approved the artifact, which helps when many mirrors and networks are involved. The beginner insight is that verification is a chain, and a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If you download a file and also download its hash from the same untrusted place, you might be verifying the attacker's version of both. Good verification relies on independent trust, such as keys you already trust or channels that are harder for attackers to manipulate. rkhunter, rkhunter, is another integrity-related tool theme, but it focuses on a different problem, which is detecting signs of rootkits and other stealthy persistence techniques. A rootkit is a form of malware designed to hide itself and maintain privileged access, often by modifying system components or using tricks that evade casual inspection. rkhunter typically checks for known indicators, suspicious file permissions, unexpected binaries, and patterns associated with known rootkit families, and it may compare hashes of important files against expected values. The important beginner understanding is that tools like rkhunter are helpful, but they are not perfect truth machines because attackers adapt and because detection often lags behind new techniques. That means a clean report does not guarantee a clean system, and a suspicious report does not automatically mean you are compromised. The best way to use such a tool is as one signal among others, combined with log review, baseline integrity tools, and awareness of what should be present on the system. Thinking in terms of multiple signals keeps you from over-trusting a single scan result. A practical way to connect AIDE and rkhunter is to treat them as answers to different questions you might ask during an investigation. AIDE answers the question of what changed compared to your baseline, which is useful for spotting unauthorized modifications and for confirming that changes are limited to expected areas after an update. rkhunter answers the question of whether there are known suspicious patterns that suggest stealthy compromise, which is useful when you suspect an attacker might have tried to hide. If AIDE shows unexpected changes in critical binaries, that can increase the urgency of deeper checks, because it suggests the system may have been altered at a fundamental level. If rkhunter flags unusual permissions or hidden artifacts, that can motivate you to focus your integrity review on those areas and to confirm whether the baseline itself might have been created too late. The key beginner lesson is that integrity work is iterative, where one signal directs you to the next check, and each check reduces uncertainty. That iterative logic is what makes security investigations manageable instead of overwhelming. Now shift to destruction, because secure erase is the part of the story that says sometimes the best way to protect data is to ensure it cannot be recovered later. Deleting a file in a normal way usually removes directory references and marks space as available, but it does not necessarily overwrite the underlying data immediately. That means recovery is often possible, especially on systems where the storage behavior preserves older blocks until they are reused. Secure erase is about reducing that recoverability by overwriting, discarding, or otherwise rendering data unreadable, depending on the storage technology and threat model. This is where beginners must be careful, because the right approach differs between a hard disk drive, HDD, and a solid-state drive, SSD, and the wrong approach can be ineffective or can damage the device. The exam-level expectation is not that you perform secure erase steps, but that you understand why normal deletion is not enough and why storage technology changes the strategy. On HDD media, overwriting can be a reasonable conceptual model because data is stored magnetically and writing new data can replace old data in a fairly direct way. The major challenge is ensuring you overwrite the correct areas and that you account for copies like backups, temporary files, and swap space that may contain fragments of sensitive information. On SSD media, the picture changes because where leveling and internal management can move data around. meaning a write request may not overwrite the same physical cells where the old data lived. That makes naive overwriting less reliable as a guarantee of destruction, and it increases the value of approaches that rely on device-level secure erase behavior or cryptographic erasure, where you destroy the key that unlocks encrypted data rather than trying to overwrite every physical location. The beginner takeaway is that secure erase is not a single universal method, but a goal with different implementations depending on technology. What matters is understanding the intent, which is preventing future recovery by an unauthorized party. This is also where encryption at rest connects back into the destruction story, because encryption can simplify secure disposal when used correctly. If a disk is encrypted and the keys are protected, then destroying the keys can render the data unreadable even if the physical blocks still contain old ciphertext. This is sometimes described as crypto shredding, and it can be far more practical than attempting to overwrite every possible storage location, especially on SSD devices. However, this only works if the encryption was in place before the sensitive data was written, because otherwise unencrypted remnants might still exist in older blocks, caches, or backups. It also depends on key handling being strong, because if keys are leaked or stored carelessly, the ciphertext may still be decryptable later. The beginner lesson is that secure destruction is a life cycle consideration, meaning you plan for disposal when you choose how to store data today. When you think that way, you avoid retroactive cleanup fantasies and you design for controlled outcomes. Supply chain risk ties directly into integrity because it asks a hard question. What if the software you install is compromised before you install it? This can happen through malicious upstream updates, compromised build systems, tampered distribution channels, or dependency confusion where the wrong package is pulled into your environment. A helpful modern concept is software bill of materials, SBOM, which is a structured inventory of what components are included in a piece of software so you can assess exposure when a vulnerability appears. Even if you never generate an SBOM yourself at a Linux Plus level, understanding the idea helps you grasp why organizations care about provenance, signatures, and trusted repositories. If you rely on unverified downloads, you increase your supply chain exposure because you are trusting the network and the source implicitly. If you rely on signed packages and known repositories, you reduce that exposure by anchoring trust in maintained keys and controlled distribution processes. The core message is that integrity is not only about what happens after installation, but also about ensuring what you install is what you intended to install. Verification and supply chain thinking also influence how you interpret integrity tool alerts, because legitimate updates will change many files and can look suspicious if you do not account for normal maintenance. When you patch a system through trusted channels, you can treat many changes as expected, but you still want confirmation that the update path was authentic and that the resulting system state matches known package versions. When you apply software from unknown sources, any unexpected change becomes harder to interpret because you do not have the same confidence that the change was legitimate. This is why administrators prefer repeatable, trusted update mechanisms and avoid one-off manual installs for core system components. It is also why hashing and signing are discussed so often, because they are the glue that connects your maintenance actions to a claim of authenticity. When you explain security decisions, being able to say that software was obtained through verified, trusted channels is a far stronger statement than saying it seemed fine when installed. That kind of evidence-based reasoning is central to a defensible security posture. Banners can feel out of place in a conversation about integrity and destruction, but they matter because they shape access expectations and can affect both legal posture and human behavior. A login banner is a message presented to users before or during authentication that typically states who the system is for, that activity may be monitored, and that unauthorized use is prohibited. The content often shows up in places like the message of the day, MOTD, and the practical point is that banners communicate boundaries clearly. From a security perspective, a banner can discourage casual misuse and can remove ambiguity about whether a user was warned, which matters in incident response and policy enforcement contexts. From an operational perspective, banners can also provide useful reminders about acceptable use and support contacts, helping legitimate users behave correctly. The key beginner insight is that security is not purely technical. because it includes communication and expectations, and banners are a simple control that reinforces that access is intentional and accountable. A banner will not stop an attacker, but it supports the broader system of governance and traceability. A mature way to tie all of these themes together is to treat integrity as an ongoing conversation between what you expect and what you observe. Tools like AIDE help you observe change compared to a baseline. Tools like rkhunter help you observe known suspicious patterns, and verification practices help you decide whether updates and artifacts deserve trust in the first place. Secure erase and destruction practices ensure that sensitive data does not remain recoverable when it no longer needs to exist, which closes a common gap in security plans that focus only on active systems. Supply chain awareness reminds you that not all threats arrive through direct attack, because some arrive hidden inside software you willingly install. Banners remind you that access is a contract, not just a network connection, and that accountability begins with clear boundaries. None of these controls is glamorous, but together they create a system that is easier to trust and easier to defend. For Linux Plus learners, the most valuable skill is being able to explain why each control exists and what problem it reduces. By the end of this episode, you should be able to describe integrity as the ability to detect unauthorized or unexpected changes and to verify that what runs on your system matches what you intended. Advanced Intrusion Detection Environment AIDE represents baseline-driven file integrity monitoring, while rkhunter represents pattern-driven checks for stealthy compromise indicators, and both are strongest when treated as evidence sources rather than as absolute truth. Verification practices, including hashing and signatures, support both supply chain trust and post-change confidence because they connect your system state to authentic sources. Secure erase is the discipline of ensuring deleted or retired data cannot be recovered later, and it demands awareness of storage technology like HDD and SSD behavior. Supply chain thinking, including concepts like SBOM, expands your defensive view beyond direct attacks to include provenance and dependency risk, while banners like MOTD reinforce boundaries and accountability at the human level. When you can connect these ideas as parts of one life cycle, you are prepared to reason through Linux Plus questions that test practical security thinking instead of isolated trivia.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.